you want to know what the reading framework has to say about how to teach phonics, then keep watching. This is the first module in my updated Phonics online training, which explains how to teach phonics like an expert, and it's absolutely free. In this free phonics training, you'll learn what phonics teaching is and why we teach it, and how to teach phonics step by step to make sure everything is covered in your phonics lessons. Welcome to this Fab Phonics training where you're going to learn how to teach phonics like an expert. And in this first lesson you'll learn what phonics is and why we teach it. And before we start to think about what phonics is, it's important for us to think about the bigger picture of how children learn to read, because phonics is only part of this, and it's quite a complicated process which can be broken down into two simple elements. Children need to be able to read the words, so recognise the letters and the shapes of the letters and remember them on the page or screen, and they need to be able to understand what those letters and words actually mean. They need to be able to understand the order of words and punctuation to be able to comprehend what they're actually reading, to make sense of their reading, because it's important not to be able to just read the words on the page. We've got to be able to understand them to be good readers, and children need to have a good grasp of both to be able to read. Neither of these two elements is more important than the other. They both take a lot of work and develop over time. Phonics teaches the word reading element in the majority. So mostly when we're teaching phonics, it's about helping children to recognise those letter sound correspondences on a page to help them to be able to read the words. It's not so much about comprehension or understanding what those words mean. And it feels a bit like this. If we were to look at this writing and we didn't understand what it actually meant, if we were a child in this position, this is like how it feels for children who are at the beginning of their learning to read journey. All they can see is lots of shapes and lots of symbols on a page. If they're ready for phonics and if they're ready for reading, they might start to do what you're probably doing now. They might look at some of those shapes and start to make associations. So in order to try and make sense of this, you might be thinking, I can see some arrows, I can see some numbers, I can see some commas, some speech marks, I can see a shape that's maybe like a ladder. And even though you don't know what this writing says or even what it means, you start to build associations. And that's a bit like children at that preschool stage. This is Molly, and when she'd learnt to read her name, she suddenly became very switched on to objects which all began with the letter M. So she was very aware that she would go in a shop, she would look, when we were out and about, she would look at signs, she would look at advertising, and she would start to say, that's in my name, that's in my name, that's in my name. In the same way that you were making associations on the writing on the previous slide, Molly started to make associations in her real life. So from that point, we knew that she was really ready to start to be introduced to these letter sound correspondences, because she was starting to be very aware of particular letters in the world around her, and she was ready to crack the code. And that is all really phonics is. It's about being able to crack the code for reading. So let's see if we can crack the code here. Here's a sentence that I've written, and I've substituted all of the letters for symbols, because that is really all we're learning to do when we're going on this phonics journey. We're trying to learn the symbols that are represented by letters that represent our spoken sounds when we're talking. So if I was to look at this and say to you, what does that sentence say? You would find that impossible, because I haven't introduced you to any of the code yet, and it doesn't relate to any of the code that you've ever seen in the world around you. But if I was to teach you one letter, you could start to look at that code and start to draw associations, partly because you're already a reader, but it gives you a bit of a step in. So, for example, the first word is a two-letter word with an O at the end. So we know from our knowledge of words that it could be to, or it could be go, or it could be no. This is a longer word here, so is it likely that it's going to begin with an O, or is it more likely that it's going to be an O sound? Is it going to be a digraph there, or is it going to be something else? So I'm going to look at that And it's given me a bit of a clue, but it's not necessarily given me enough to be able to make this sentence understood by you or by me. Then I'm going to just add in the vowels. That's just 5 letters. And now already you can have a really good go at being able to work out what this sentence says. Even if you didn't really know what it meant, you would start to try and work it out. And you can see here now that we've got a 3-letter word here with an O and U making the ow sound. So because we know that the O and the U together make an ow sound, we can assume that that's probably a word like hour or out. We've got here this word here, ow. That's probably out there, out. We can start to think about this in a more logical way and associate it with words that we already know. So have you got an idea about what it could say yet? Now I've just added in 2 really common letter sound correspondences. I've added in an S and a T. So just think, I've only added into this code 5 vowels plus an S and a T, 7 letters. And already we can start to try and work out what this sentence says. What do you think it says? Go outside and put the bin out. So you can see that just by learning 7 letter sound correspondences, even though some of those were digraphs where we've got 2 letters making one sound, even though we were doing that, it actually was quite a simple and a quick and efficient process. And that's really what we're trying to do with phonics. We're trying to get the children to read words as quickly, efficiently and automatically as they can, because until they can do that, they can't enjoy their reading. They don't feel confident with their reading. They don't feel like capable readers. It's hard work. So this idea of word reading is a rapid one, and it's about introducing the letter sound correspondences as quickly as we can and as memorably as we can to help the children to be able to pick up words quickly and to read sentences rapidly. It's not just about the process about recognising the letter sound correspondences though. To be able to do something with those is quite important. So for that we use this process which is called blending, where we say each of the separate letter sound correspondences and then blend them back together to read a whole word. So for example, in this word we would have b, r, I, t, right, because IGH makes an I sound. So b, r, I, t, right. That's what blending looks like. On the flip side of that, there is segmenting, which is the process that we go through when children have learnt some letter sound correspondences to be able to spell words. So in this example, I wanted to spell the word flight, and I thought in my head, how can I separate the word flight into separate spoken sounds? L, I, t, flight. And then I can associate those with the letter sound correspondences that I know. Remember, the IGH is an I sound and they all go together as a trigraph, which we'll learn about later. And they form the whole word flight. That's what segmenting is. So blending is for reading. Segmenting is breaking words up to be able to spell them. So all great phonics lessons need to include those things. They need to include the knowledge of the alphabetic code. We introduce it bit by bit, just in the same way that I did in the go outside and put the bin out sentence. We strategically introduce the letter sound correspondences so children build them quickly to be able to read more and more words and sentences. Sometimes they're single letter sound correspondences, so an S making a S sound. Sometimes it can be 2 letters making one sound, so an O and a U in the word out. Or it could be 3 letters making one sound, like an IGH making an I sound. But that's primarily the first part of any phonics lesson. It's about teaching a new element of the alphabetic code. The second part of any phonics lesson is all about teaching blending for reading and segmenting for spelling. And when children can do all of those and they build those skills over time, they'll be making rapid progress in phonics and that will really help with the word reading element of being able to learn to read. So if I was to set learning intentions for any of my phonics lessons as a phonics expert, I would set it out like this: that children are going to be learning to recognise letters or groups of letters and the corresponding spoken sounds that they make in words. So for example, d, o, k, or s, t, e, s, or k, l, ow, d. Those correspondences. I'm also going to be teaching putting sounds together to be able to read whole words by blending. D, o, g, dog, st, es, stairs, cloud, cloud. I'm also breaking words up into the separate sounds to be able to spell them. How do I spell the word dog? D, o, g. How do I spell the word stairs? St, es. How do I spell the word cloud? Cloud. So what does this look like when I'm teaching phonics in a lesson? Well, this is an example of a plan, and you can start to evaluate your own plans using this kind of process. So do you, at the beginning of your lessons, begin by revising knowledge of the alphabetic code and teaching always a new part of that alphabetic code? How we go about this is going to be covered in more detail later, but they're the two first parts of any lesson, and it's all about introducing and revising a part of that alphabetic code. And remember, the other part of any great phonics lesson is about the teaching of blending for reading and segmenting for spelling. And in any great phonics lesson, you'll see that the children have practice at both of those in single words and then applying them in reading or in writing in whole sentences. So to teach a phonics lesson like an expert, you need to have those elements all in place in your planning. Just a reminder here that phonics isn't about comprehension. Remember, in the beginning we talked about the fact that when we teach phonics, it's part of a word reading journey. So it's not about comprehension, it's about decoding. It's about thinking about what that code is and putting those letters together and blending them together to be able to read them. So here are two simple things to think about and avoid. First of all, avoid children thinking of their own words and sentences, or thinking of words beginning with a particular sound. So when you say to the children, oh, who can think of a word beginning with B? Or who can tell me some words that have got the ow sound in them? What you're asking them to do is you're asking them to trawl through their vocabulary of known words. So that's a language comprehension intention, not an intention which is about recognising the letter sound correspondences or being able to read them in whole words. So definitely avoid those. Always be in control of the words yourself and the sentences that you want the children to be able to read. Also avoid spending too long working out if a word is a real word or a nonsense word. Again, working out if a word is a real word or not a real word is about comprehension of words and understanding of what real words are and what aren't, and that's to do with vocabulary. We can play games with real and nonsense words, but really the emphasis of these games should be about recognising the letter sound correspondences and blending to read those words, not to be able to work out if a word is real or not, because that's to do with language comprehension. So remember, this is what we've learnt so far. Learning to read requires two elements: word reading and comprehension. Phonics teaches mainly the word reading element, and learning to read is like cracking a code. Children need to know the alphabetic code by sight and automatically to be capable and confident readers. To be able to do something with those letters, the children need to be able to blend, and that's a skill which helps children to read. They also need to learn to segment, which is a skill which helps children to learn to spell. And all great phonics lessons include teaching the alphabetic code and blending and segmenting both in single words and in sentences. So remember, this is what we've learnt so far. Learning to read requires two elements: word reading and comprehension. Phonics teaches mainly the word reading element, and learning to read is like cracking a code. Children need to know the alphabetic code by sight and automatically to be capable and confident readers. To be able to do something with those letters, the children need to be able to blend, and that's a skill which helps children to read. They also need to learn to segment, which is a skill which helps children to learn to spell. And all great phonics lessons include teaching the alphabetic code and blending and segmenting both in single words and in sentences. So there you have it, an introduction into how to teach phonics like an expert. The full Fab Phonics online training is linked in the description below. It includes all the information, top tips, activity ideas and planning guidance you'll need to teach phonics spectacularly well. Make sure you subscribe and click the bell and you'll be notified as soon as more videos like this are added to the channel. Also, we'd love you to come and join our Letters and Sounds Phonics Facebook group, where we're a community of teachers and teaching assistants sharing ideas and updates every day. And if you found this video useful, give it a quick thumbs up or leave me a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. See you soon!